Hello everyone, I am back with another video this month. I just wanted to do a video that was a bit more focused this time around for this new lab episode, specifically talking about my process when it comes to getting over like an art block, or if you're feeling a bit rusty, having not done any sort of creative work in a while. And I thought it'd be good to kind of go over this time lapse that I did in Adobe Fresco to basically break down each of my sketches that I've done step by step. I kind of do these massive sketch panels over the span of a few months, and they're kind of like a playground for me to just sort of, try something new that I might have learned, experiment a little bit, or, getting over any sort of creative block that I might be hitting, which is something that a lot of us go through, myself included, time and time again. So I'm going to just hit play real quick on this video, and I'll just kind of talk through, sort of wing it in terms of what, I was sticking behind each of these sketches, and, hopefully this kind of shines a light in terms of the artistic process for a lot of artists, both novices and professionals. And these are methods that you guys can use for yourselves as well at home. So if you're curious, look no further. Hopefully this video will be a bit insightful for some of you. And it's also, I think, for myself as an artist, quite useful for me to go back and study, methods and ways in which I problem solve and kind of work through, my ideas here in Sketch. How do I take reference, right, and make it my own, not just translating it one-to-one every time. The former obviously being important when it comes to just practice and just basic exercise, but it's also nice to kind of push the creative mind a little bit and kind of take a reference and try not to be so literal one-to-one in terms of what is in the photograph or whatever you're referencing to what you put on page. So without further ado, let's have a bit of a look. All right, so starting with this one, I'm trying to kind of recall what was my thought process in kind of doing these. So I know one of my main weaknesses since revisiting my sort of portraiture over these last few months is trying to capture likeness. So a couple of these different references, this one specifically with Tyler the Creator, I just wanted to, try and play around and see if I can not only capture his reference, but also play with rendering a little bit, which is like another aspect of my work that I rarely ever do. My colors tend to be very, very flat, comic-like, if you will, anime-like, pop art, just keeping it very, very simple, very, very bold. And I wanted to flex, my rendering chops here a bit more. Something that I haven't done in years and years, and I felt super rusty trying to get this down. One of the takeaways for something like this is, to kind of lower your expectations and not try to be too hard on yourself. And, especially when you're trying something or revisiting something that you haven't done in a while, that you might be quite rusty in, or that you're new to, give yourself some grace to see how far you can push something, right? In this sketch right here, this is what I was talking about earlier about, using reference as a means of kind of getting over a creative block. So I'm recently on paternity, haven't worked on the iPad for a while, haven't been in the sketchbook for even longer than that. So using reference here, I found just like a fashion photograph on Pinterest, is a great way to kind of break that. And, it can start as something as simply as just like copying it one-to-one, like I did with the celebrity portraits to the left. But you can also use it as a starting point to kind of play around and be a bit more, experimental with your color, with the elements that you put on the character, and just have a bit of fun. Try not to be too sacred with it. Here I'm just trying to play around, adding some iconography on a little bit, playing with the skin tones. Again, trying some rendering techniques, which I'm not too familiar with, I'm not too good at just yet, but it was kind of nice to flex those muscles a bit and play around a bit more with this particular part of the sketch. Let's see. So yeah, I'm going back to the celeb portrait again. This one is of Anya Taylor-Joy. Yeah, so there's her photo right there. And, you know, again, doesn't quite look like her, but I kept revisiting it because I wanted to just maintain the practice a little bit. And again, it was a very, very nice sort of low-key exercise, very minimal pressure, a great way to, again, just kind of get out of your comfort zone, working with reference, but then also figure out ways to kind of stylize it a little bit and make it your own. So as you can see here, I also went back to Tyler, the creator, trying to be a bit more literal with his skin toning, but then playing around with his hat patterning. This one is where, you know, I started to get a bit more comfortable. I kind of did this blind, just looking at, you know, one of my own OCs, one of my own characters from a project called Burizu. I have plenty of videos on that on my channel. I'll be sure to add a link somewhere in the video towards one of them. And yeah, this is just of one of my OCs. Just wanted to, you know, try like a 3/4 profile a little bit of this character, playing with some of the rendering, playing with some of the shading, something very quick. This is kind of like the main centerpiece of this whole thing that kind of made me think about doing this video, using reference as a means to get over that art block that we were talking about, right? So here I gathered a bunch of different references, all of them doing slightly different things, you know, getting an understanding of fashion, getting an understanding of posing. Is she holding a weapon? I knew I wanted to be some sort of like a caricature or a manga representation of Doichi, the hip hop artist. So looking at her album art and then figuring out another way to kind of apply the alligator on her shoulder instead of just being on her lap, which I thought was quite cool, especially since she's going to be standing. Keeping it within my style, but then also utilizing reference to kind of find ideas that I could make my own, right? So it was a very sort of quick and dirty process. I didn't really finalize any of the line work, but I knew kind of going in what I wanted once I saw the references, and then it was just kind of bringing it home from there. So a really, really fun exercise. This came together in a matter of, I would say maybe an hour or so, just kind of messing around, you know, going back and adding some other details to kind of finesse it a bit more and give it a bit more pop, which was a lot of fun. But I think this is probably like the best example of kind of utilizing reference to make something for yourself to get over that art block. Here it's just like an anatomy exercise. There was also another reference image on here, which I'll be sure to add on posts. I don't see it right now, but you guys will see it yourselves. Another reference that I grabbed from Pinterest or whatever. And just understanding back muscles. Back muscles is something that is probably one of my weaker standpoints in terms of, you know, trying to get it from memory. So I'll try to look at some anatomy references and, you know, play with some shading again, trying a different render style once again, just to get out of my comfort zone. I find with these sketches, it's a great opportunity to, you know, because it's not for client and not for something personal that you're holding too sacred, to kind of go nuts and play around with it. So I was messing around with the shading, messing around with the toning, playing with the accents a little bit, and erring on the side of more realism for that too, which was kind of fun. So here I'm kind of just recomposing the page, and one last doodle, another one of my OCs from that same Burizu project that I mentioned before of Makoto, drawing her sword. This one is definitely a Jujutsu Kaisen ode. Specifically thinking of Jujutsu Kaisen 0. The character's name escapes me, but he has a katana, and I like the pose on there. So I just wanted to do something similar for my own OC. I'll be sure to put that reference image on there too. Outside of that, it's mostly just off the top, just kind of figuring out the composition, elements to add, things like that. This is where I was just most comfortable, you know, after doing all these sketches, kind of breaking the rust and, you know, getting over the artist block, and just thought it was a nice way to bring this whole page to a close, adding another one of my OCs on here. And so yeah, just adding some shading, something that's very, you know, common in my own style, adding some flares, and that pretty much wraps it up. Yeah, that's it. Let me know if you guys enjoyed this video. Something quick, something dirty, something, you know, that I put together, you know, very, very rapidly, but I thought it would be nice to give you guys something that lets you into my process a bit more, especially when it comes to, you know, my sketches, as well as coming up with ideas for my own work. So that concludes this episode of The Lab. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Be sure to subscribe, and yeah, I'll catch you guys next time. Later.